a West Coast news editor at People Magazine. And I am so excited to be talking to one of my favorite authors, an incredible role model for so many, Glennon Doyle.
Hi, everybody. I'm Glennon Doyle. I'm the author of Untamed, Love Warrior and Carry On Warrior, and I'm the founder of Together Rising, which is a nonprofit that serves marginalized kiddos and women all over the world.
I mean, so many things to talk about, but of course you mentioned this fantastic, amazing book that was what I think everyone needed. And it came out at exactly the time that everyone needed it. So you were a little bit of a fortune teller in that way. The book has had such enormous success. And I know you could feel it as it was kind of bubbling up because of the response that you got from, on social media and people reaching out to you. But now all of these weeks later, this bestseller of 2020, I mean, it has not left the top of the charts. How do you feel about that? And what does it say really about what we all needed right now? How people responded so deeply to this book, which was your story?
Yeah, the response to Untamed has been wild. Yeah, I don't know what was so important about it meeting this moment, other than I think it's a book that is about kind of the power that comes when we are still, when we kind of face our own crap for the first time. I think of a lot about a metaphor I wrote in the book about how we're kind of all snow globes. I had this little snow globe when I was a kid, and I loved it, but I hated it. I loved it because it was so pretty. You could shake it all up and it was sparkly and snowy. But then I was scared of it because when the snow settled, there was this red dragon at the center. And I thought the dragon was terrifying. So I used to actually walk into my room and shake it up real quick and try to keep it shaken. And I think that's how I am as a human being. And a little bit how we all are, right? Is that we are like snow globes and we're constantly keeping ourselves shaken up. And the dragons at the center of our lives are the things that we know we have to face, but we haven't. And the dragons in our relationships are the cracks and the brokenness that we ignore. And so I think what's been really cool about COVID, while it's been, I mean, as someone who runs a nonprofit for women and children, the pain and loss has been unprecedented. But one interesting thing is that it's been a collective settling of the snow globe, right? And so I have noticed friends talking to me honestly for the first time. I mean, I can't tell you how many friends have said to me in one way or another, lately I'm wondering if those 9 glasses of wine a night are really my best way for right? Talking about the problems in their relationship, or we're looking at the dragons in our nation, right? For the first time, which we all know is systematic racism. So it was a book, I guess, matched for the moment that so many of us found ourselves in, which was like a forced settling of things.
It is. And it's when you have that quiet, you can really address, and you talked about this in your book as well, about those lies that we tell ourselves, which is what you're saying now, whether it's, is the wine winning, is what you said, or is this relationship over? And these tough conversations that normally we do keep going, but it is scary to say those to ourselves, right? So that's why we don't, because it's so scary to say those things to ourselves.
As you're talking right now, I'm thinking of one that I am currently shaking up. So yes, I mean, if we wanted to look at our dragons, we'd be slaying them every day, right? Dragons are terrifying. And the reason we don't want to get still is because the truth is in the stillness, right? And the truth is usually something scary or hard, which is why we pretend it's not there. What I have found about women who are kind of living on fire, just meaning living inside their truth and purpose and meaning, is that they don't avoid those dragons.
Well, do you think traditionally, it does seem, I mean, all the signs point to society has not made it easier for women to be honest with themselves or be honest with other people, where it seems in so many circumstances, men can just be honest. They can walk into the room and say, this is what you're going to give me, or this is what I need. And women have not been taught to do that. And we're now, how have we gotten to 2021 and we're still trying to unravel that, that systemic kind of cultural thing that's been embedded in women, and we know better, right? But do you think we're coming to a point where women can try to, because there is that, it's such a different cultural or however societal pressure for women to be a certain way, feel a certain way, and not speak up. Whereas for men, it's
absolutely every reaction to a public woman or a woman who uses her voice in a corporation, in any arena, every reaction is gendered. And it's not just that women, it's not all on us. It's not just that women haven't learned how to assert ourselves. It's that the world has not learned how to react to a woman who is asserting herself, right? And this affects women in so many ways. I mean, I was just thinking before I got on this call that the first article that ever came out about Untamed in the New York Times, the title was Glennon Doyle writes a third memoir, ? Okay. The assumption was like, this woman's going to say another thing. She has freaking 3 things to say.
Three whole things.
We humored her the first 2 times, but are you serious? She's going to say another thing? And of course, David Sedaris comes out with a book 2 weeks later. What is his 39th book?
Right.
And it's like, yay.
He's allowed to say lots of things.
Of course he has 39 things to say. But Glennon Doyle's going to say 3 things? It's just, and then we find so often that, the way I look at it is like when a man releases work into the world or art or whatever it is, the world looks at the art or the work and says, is this art or this work worthy? But when a woman releases work or art into the world looks at the woman and the world says, is this woman worthy of releasing work? I can't even muck through what people are talking about in terms of me to get to the point where anybody's talking about my book. This affects women daily, and it affects our success, and it affects our, how many times have women who are watching this, get their performance reports in one way or another, and they can, conduct themselves in the exact same way and environment that a man would, but the man on his performance review will be labeled as a leader, passionate, full of potential. And the woman will be difficult, aggressive, complicated, ambitious, as if that's a bad thing. So, and the people that are writing these reports, they're not bad. They're just conditioned. They've been breathing in a profoundly misogynistic society, and they've learned to interpret men and women differently.
You think about even when someone says, great job on this, or you're incredible at this, or you go, no. First instinct is, right? Like, no, I'm not. No. That wasn't, somebody else did that. And I didn't, mostly was someone else, it's this tendency. And I have now been conscious in my own life of if somebody, says something complimentary or, that I'm trying to suppress that instinct, and you go, well, thank you. I'm really happy with it, and it is shockingly hard to do, but it is so important, right? To kind of take ownership and not be afraid to be that person that, oh, she thinks she's so great. Cause that's right. That's the thing that you are afraid of in your head. You don't want people to think that you think you're great. So
because Abby and I were talking about this the other day, because we were listening to these freaking teeny bop songs that the kids had on. And all the songs were like, the vibe of it was like, she's so beautiful, but the really cool thing about her is she doesn't know she's beautiful. Okay. So the important thing is to be beautiful, but then be a dumbass also, right? Like to be perfect, but to think you suck. Like that's the perfect girl or the perfect woman, right? Because God forbid you actually would know who you are or have some clue, right? It's just so interesting. I mean, I think it's certainly one of the like many pieces of resistance that we can embrace. Like at least when somebody identifies something beautiful that we've done, we could say, thank you.
I want to know, can we actually also be a little mad that we didn't speak up, because now all of these things that are happening in the last few years, I mean, everything from Me Too to now this kind of collective coming together moment. We're all just kind of piecing together things that were so wrong or we were wronged by in our past. You can't help but feel a little angry that, I should have said something back then. I should have spoken up. I shouldn't have let that happen. And it's frustrating because we all have dealt with that.
Yeah. And don't you feel like, I don't feel like that just about like the 80s. I feel like that about like 20 minutes ago. Like this is how it's always is for me. Like because you're in the middle of something and you're like, this doesn't feel right. But then you can't like put your brain around what's happening until an hour and a half later, and you're in your car and you're like, damn it to hell. And then you think of like the perfect thing to say. But the beautiful thing is the more we talk about these situations, the more consciousness changes and the more likely it is, we know this, for it to occur to us in the moment. That does happen. This is just part of the process, right? Where we're slowly learning like, wait, that's misogynistic. Wait, that's racist. Wait, that's whatever. But over time, we get to the point where we're seeing it and saying it, right?
Yeah. And that crosses over into, issues of racism in public places, or, how many times have you read or heard about something horribly offensive or racist happening and only afterwards, kind of decide, that wasn't right. And, that you didn't speak up as it was happening. There were so many things that were just in our faces that did it feel like a different sort of reckoning. And what's interesting is your book came out obviously before the summer, before everything that we dealt with the whole level of these protests and people coming out and speaking up and trying to just get to this point of where we're moving in the right direction. But did it feel like because you're so behind it and it's so passionate about your own issues, and you have been, so did it feel different for you, or did it feel kind of like, no, now everyone's kind of on board, or did it feel bigger?
It felt like the first time that people were forced to look at the dragon they've been avoiding, right? I mean, when you think back to that time and you think about the video of George Floyd's murder, we know that isn't new. We know that nothing was new about that. We know that police brutality has been a daily occurrence in communities of color for so long, right? We know that. So what was different about this one man and this one video? And I think that one of the things that was different is that we had nowhere to look away. We were all stuck in our homes. The outlets were replaying and replaying. People who would have just skipped away from it, keeping their snow globes shaken, moved on to the next thing, were forced to look at it. This whole idea that I think is so true in personal lives, relationships, communities, nations, that there is never any sort of revolution or big change until there's a revelation.
There's no one answer, right? But what's the most important thing when it comes to trying to address the inequality of just the care and the resources that so many communities and people need for their own health, for their lives?
I know. What I would hope is that right now we would just be real easy and gentle on ourselves. I hope that as there is sort of a return to normal, that there is no return to normal. Like, I think we have to not go gently into that night. We have always forever been overburdened, overtaxed. We have been carrying more than half the sky, right? Every institution that we work for is broken. Like, we cannot abide by any sort of return to normal. When things start to go back, we need to organize. We need to tell the truth about our lives, right? We need to say no. If we need to march, we just need to boycott everything and not go back.
I think that's another.
That will happen, but right now we just need to survive.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, that especially the first few months of quarantine and all of that. I mean, it did seem obviously a disproportionate amount of care and kind of the craziness of all of that fell on the caretaker, the teacher, the person who's trying to cook dinner and teach math and, make sure that the right supplies are ordered for the house and, all of that. And I think that for so long, it was so intensely overwhelming because there was no way to do it all. There was no way to be the perfect teacher and have all the meals, including the hot breakfast and the hot lunch, and also make sure that your living space is not a complete disaster area. Do you think women still are way too hard on themselves? Because it is, this notion of you're failing if you're not doing 100% just seems pretty unfair and totally unattainable.
Yeah. I mean, I have so many friends who deal with this perfection thing you're talking about. I do not deal with the perfection thing. I don't. And I mean that like, I really mean that genuinely. In that I know I have had the blessing of being an addict. So going through recovery. And I have had the challenge and the gift of struggling with mental health my whole life. So I learned pretty early on that my job, I mean, I wake up every morning and I don't ask myself, like, how can I be amazing today? Like, how can I be perfect today? How can I wake up and my main question is, what do I have to do today to not lose my shit? That's it. I mean, my whole business, my family, my marriage, everything goes okay if I just don't lose my shit, right? Which just means that I have to take care of myself. Like when you go through recovery, you learn that at the end of the day, that's all there is. That as women, we are not down here just to give, just to serve, just to, make sure that everyone else's lives are perfect. That it is okay for us to also find joy, for also to be takers, to also take in joy and rest and sex and food and all of the things that actually make life worth living, right?
I love what you said about this notion of selfless as, being this quality that you want to attain as a woman, right? But when the word itself means that you're giving, you're giving of yourself first and foremost, and rather than taking care of yourself first, right? And you say, abandon everyone else before you abandon yourself, So tell me about that, because I love that notion, especially now.
The idea is not to abandon other people, but the idea is if you are faced with, which we are every single day, a million decisions where you have to decide whether to abandon yourself or to abandon other people's expectations of you, then it is your duty to not abandon yourself and to disappoint. Women are so afraid to disappoint anybody. But when you even think about that word, disappoint, like we have literally appointed other people as the guide of our lives, right? Like we need to systematically and intentionally disappoint everybody on earth and appoint ourselves as the guide of our lives, right?
Yeah. And I think it, goes hand in hand also with the parenting and, and not just parenting now, but in general. I think that there's so often there's this idea that the best moms or the best parents are the ones who are their only priorities are their kids, right? And they don't do anything else, or they don't, they're focused on the kids 24/7. And if you're not, then you're an absentee parent, or you're not doing everything you should be doing for your kids, right? But tell me about that, because that's not being the best parent, is giving every inch of yourself to another person, because you don't want your kids.
Love. It's not love. I can tell you that. I mean, it's not maybe the best parenting when you actually stop and think about it. If you accept cultural ideas of what makes a great mom, you will, by osmosis, believe that the best mothers are martyrs. The best mothers just like slowly die. They just bury their ambition and their emotion and their dreams and their needs, and they slowly disappear, and then they call that love, right? I mean, I believed that for a long time. I almost did not pursue my love with Abby, and I almost went back to a broken marriage because I told myself I could not hurt my children, right? And then one day I'm looking at my daughter Tish and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm staying in this marriage for her, but would I want this marriage for her? Wow. And if I wouldn't want this marriage for her, then why am I modeling bad love for her and calling that good parenting?
Wow. Yeah.
And that's because I had bought the shit the culture told me. That, oh, good mothering means martyring myself, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not a gift to pass down to your children. That's an unbelievable burden. And so you realize when you start to think about these things, oh, wait, what if motherhood is not about slowly dying for your kids, but modeling for your kids how to bravely live their whole life?
Yeah.
Right? Because our kids will only allow themselves to live as fully and freely as we allow ourselves to live at the end.
Mm-hmm. For your kids, you don't want them to have maybe a friendship where they're constantly feeling like they can't be themselves, or they're being judged, or they have a friend who flakes on them. So, you think about that for your own kids, and then you think, well, I have a friend who doesn't always make me feel, and so evaluating relationships seems like another thing that we could all do right now, right? And
like, how about we don't hang out with people who make us feel like shit? Like, that's the start. That's the only cool thing about being a grown-up.
Let's all do that.
Right?
I think one thing that people love about your relationship, or seeing your relationship with Abby, you guys share those moments on social media or the way that you speak about each other. What always strikes me is a real honesty, and not honesty even the way that we've been talking about it, but honesty of, if you're annoyed with something or it's a little thing, or you're gonna say it, and sometimes it feels silly, sometimes it feels like, okay, this is kind of lame, but I really didn't like that you blah 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 blah, or and I've been trying to do that myself too more, and it's amazing what you can kind of how much easier you can breathe if you just get rid of one little thing that was bugging you. Yeah. So tell me about that, because I think that's another thing that's very hard, especially when you've been in a long-term relationship, or you're just starting out.
I feel like as women, we are so trained to avoid conflict all the time. Like, we think we can't say the thing or do the thing because it'll rock the boat, because it'll make everyone uncomfortable, because it'll be awkward, because there's a cost to it. But the thing we haven't considered is that there's a cost to not saying the thing and not doing the thing. And that cost is that we slowly die inside and our relationships suffer. We don't even give them a chance. What
to you right now is, top of the list? What's most important right now, or what can we mostly be focusing on right now? It's, we're celebrating International Women's Day, which feels so momentous, even considering, a year ago, we were just on the precipice of COVID and this crazy year that we had. What feels the most pressing, or what weighs on you the most right now for women and with women as a collective? What's most important?
What women need is not like any more commercials or any more songs or any more, honestly, days celebrating us. What women need is effing policy change. And the people doing the most effective work for policy change are the Black and Brown, Indigenous, Native, Latinx grassroots organizers all over this country. And so I know what I'm doing is just showing up and saying, put me in, coach. Like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. I mean, I don't know. I think that's the most effective thing that women could possibly be doing with their time right now. We've seen what happens when women support each other as well, too. I mean,
And that notion of not being the person on the phone who isn't having someone who says something and no one is chiming in. You know, it can be uncomfortable, right? To speak up for someone or to say something or to put yourself out there, especially if you're still worried about what people think of you, you know, or that people might not agree with you.
I think women, we are so afraid of overreacting. But we've been underreacting for so long that it might take overreacting for a few centuries, right? Just to get to some sense of equality. So yeah, I mean, since that time that I did that I made that mistake, I have been committed to speaking up every time, even if I have to apologize later because I was totally wrong. We have to start having each other's backs because our silence allows all of that racism and misogyny, allows it all to live.
It's almost like we also all need to agree, and just this is in terms of supporting each other also, let's all agree, you know, you see people on social media who show, quote, their messy lives, and they're like, look, I'm not perfect. And it's kind of this, oh, wow, they're so bold. They're honest about, you know, that their life's not perfect. But we're still holding on to that, right? And, you know, you could have conversations with people who are scared, even with their close friends, to say, look, I'm unhappy with this, or maybe I need help with this, or I can't do it all by myself. And maybe we're slowly getting there, right? Where we can all kind of, can we all just talk about the fact that no one has a perfect life, that we all have things that make us sad and make us frustrated and make us doubt ourselves. You know, it's kind of that, you know, how do we live our lives where we can be honest with ourselves, but also really with everyone else about, you know, the hard parts, the not pretty parts.
I mean, this is another gift of recovery for me, right? I mean, the first time I ever went to a recovery meeting and sat, when I first decided to get sober when I was 25, I became bulimic when I was 10, alcoholic when I was 19, got sober when I was 25. And I went to my first recovery meeting and sat down and started listening to people talk. And my first thought was, oh my God, this is where they keep the honest people. I was so relieved. And those are the circles and the rooms that I learned that life gets at least 20% better the second you start telling the truth. And then it gets at least 40% better when you find some honest people that you can listen to tell the truth. I think most of us know that social media isn't the place where we're going to get the intimacy and truth that we found in those. So one of the things we can do is stop looking for it there.
Right.
It's not made for that. But God, that's why I love writing. I mean, I have to have a place where I can use my real voice, not my like representative that I send out to like, nah, it's fine, everything's fine, it's all good. Like everybody needs it. Women, we all, and men too, my God, they're not allowed to talk about anything real. All they're allowed to talk about is sports and the weather. And I mean, I don't know how they do it. But I just feel like, God, everybody needs a place or people or a medium where they are just all soul and not their roles, right? Where they can really tell and hear the truth. Absolutely. That's like oxygen.